Everyone, welcome to the D4 Tabletop Conference. And this is, and I'm going to read this because it's a really long title, a discussion with retailers about the local gaming store landscape and what the future holds. So that is our panel. And I have with us three panelists, all from the game store industry, game retailer industry. And so let's go around the windows and then have everyone introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what their businesses are. And then we'll get into some questions and we'll all have a nice discussion about what that all looks like. So let's start with you, Donna. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Well, I'm Donna Ricci. I own Geeky Teas and Games in Burbank, California. We're a rather strange local game store in that we also house a cat rescue. And we sell loose leaf teas along with our retail board game offerings and community play space.
Very cool. Thank you. And then how about you, Tim?
My name is Timm Metivier. I own Meepleville Board Game Cafe in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we've been in business for 6 years. We have a retail store. We also have a cafe where we have beer, wine, pizza, smoothies, nachos, hamburgers, and stuff like that. And then we have a play space with over 2,600 games that people pay an admission to come in and play.
Thank you. And then Paul, how about you?
Hi, I'm Paul Alexander Butler. I own Games and Stuff, which is outside of Baltimore, Maryland. It's a large retail store and event center. It's about 7,700 square feet. About half of that devoted to event space. Slightly related to the topic at hand is I'm also co-owner of Gaming Days LLC, which is the new owner of Free RPG Day, which is a an event centered around local game stores. So
very cool. And then at least two of you might have additional guests come on the show periodically or just kind of chime in. You both have cats, so Paul and Donna. So we'll see if they're welcome on the show. They're welcome to participate. So, okay, well, let's get started. So let's talk about the obvious thing, which impacted anyone that had a store or a retail outlet of some sort, a brick and mortar store. Let's talk about the pandemic in 2020. So let's go around and talk. Let's say, Tim, let's start with you because you also are in a city that's known for tourism and you depend a lot on people coming in and visiting the city. And also, I assume you serve a lot of the local residents as well. But how has 2020 treated you? How has the pandemic treated you so far?
Well, it's been tough. It's kind of, sucked for everybody, I'm sure. And it's been really hard. One of the big things, psychologically and mentally, just for me is, I think all of us here on the panel, we're all entrepreneurs, own our own businesses and stuff. And that's one of our driving forces. We're just that kind of people. But this past year, I've sort of had to, turn 180 degree and I've had to be sort of a beggar, applying for loans and grants and all that kind of stuff. And it's just so antithetical, it's just against everything that I sort of being motivated to try to run my business. So it was weird trying to adjust to that dynamic, shifting my focus to just trying to survive instead of thriving. So yeah, it was kind of tough.
Okay, and then Paul, how about yourself? How was the business for you in the last year and a half or so?
yeah, I mean, it was, pretty similar to Tim's experience in that, especially at the beginning of all the craziness last year, it was pretty terrifying. And, briefly laying off the entire staff was one of the most horrible things I've ever had to do in my life. But being able to pivot and, we did get lucky with some payroll protection program money. And immediately being able to pivot to curbside pickup and local delivery, and then moving into e-commerce, I felt pretty strong coming out of it. But those first 3 months were kind of hairy, but here we are on the flip side, and I feel like the business is stronger than ever. In a lot of ways, it forced our hand to do stuff that we might have taken a more laid back approach to, especially in regards to like e-commerce. It wasn't exactly at the top of my to-do list, and suddenly it was very important.
All right, cool. Yeah, and we'll get to some of those things as well as far as how you're pivoting and how you're sort of evolving and adjusting to maybe the near the end of the pandemic as we see it. So, and how about you, Donna? How was the 2020 and the pandemic for you?
It started with a lot of uncertainty and stress for us the first few months, but like Paul, we came through okay. We decided to go ahead and put things online, which we were not planning to do, because anyone shopping online is probably price matching and going to Amazon. And it turned out not to be the case for our locals. It made it simply more convenient for them to to buy and quickly dash in or get curbside. So for a while we were doing curbside cosplay, and that helped for a while because it not only accidentally got us some media attention, but it tried to lighten the mood in the beginning of this. But we also got payroll protection, and that enabled us to keep some staff around, and others were happier to go make money on Postmates for a bit before coming back.
Right.
And yeah, so overall, I think that we have weathered this very well.
Okay, that's good to hear. So before this panel, we were talking, and then Tim, you mentioned one of the things I was curious about was, you still have bills to pay during the pandemic. So even if the state's closing things down or the stores are closing down and you can't have customers in there, landlords may have other expectations. So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences here in these matters?
Yeah, it's just been very difficult. My place is in a big center, and the company that owns my center owns about 150 across the country, and so I'm just a little piece that they really don't care about, and so I've really gotten no relief. They, after begging and crying and whatever, I got 1 month out of the whole entire pandemic of rent relief, and I had to do everything I could just to get that, but. Yeah, it was just really tough that I didn't have like an owner I could go to personally to talk to and help me through this and all that kind of stuff. So it was really tough on that end.
And so from my perspective, right, as a muggle, and I'm not a business owner, not running a cafe or anything, I would think a landlord would rather get some rent from you, even if it's half the rent, then rather than have that space vacated and you out of there, no one paying rent. But is that not the case?
No, I offered full CAM and 50% rent, like, from day one at the pandemic, like April 1st, and they rejected me. So,
and
yeah.
Why would that be? Like, as business owners, like, why would a landlord not take that deal versus risking losing you and having zero revenue from your store?
Well, again, Paul brought it up. I don't necessarily believe that these landlords are getting zero revenue, because he had mentioned that a lot of them, with their insurance policies and stuff like that, they get some sort of revenue anyway, whether spaces are occupied or not. So I don't really think it necessarily hurts them as we may think it does.
I have a sneaking suspicion my landlord makes most of their money that way.
And then, Donna, you had your own sort of stories about dealing with the owner, right, of the business, of the building. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I don't want to name names, but there is a restaurant locally that has defied all orders, even so far as gotten shut down and power turned off. So they brought in generators and flaunted eating inside without masks. And it unfortunately came to light that that person is also our landlord. I have luckily never really had dealings with him. We go with a go-between, a property manager, who have been lovely and voluntarily allowed us to pay 10% less in rent and not do our yearly agreed upon increase in our lease. But to the point of, you were asking, why would they do that? Why would they just take no rent rather than some rent from Timm? If Timm is still in a lease and Timm has to close, he can sue for the remainder of the lease at full price and force Timm to use whatever he sells off as far as stock to pay that back.
I see. So if you're a cold-hearted landlord and you just don't care, you're getting that money one way or another. So
probably.
Yeah.
I'm just assuming, Timm. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I would dare say you're absolutely correct. Again, it's just a big game with those people, especially the landlords in my situation, who just have these multi-properties and they're shifting this, shifting that, and they know how to play the game. They know all those things. But absolutely, Donna, I would agree that they just don't care, and they have methods to make sure they get something from you. So.
Mm-hmm. That's tough for business owners. Well, let's spin it. Let's kind of turn this to something a little bit more positive and talk about where we are today. Right, it's middle of 2021. People are getting vaccinated. Things are loosening up, and it feels like things are turning around. So I just want to know what the vibe is like from your perspective. Right, let's start with you, Paul. And it's like, are you seeing more customers, or are you anticipating more customers? What is it like today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the prevailing vibe is one of hope. I do think people are seeing changes happen, and just about everybody in my state and surrounding area can get a vaccine pretty regularly at this point. So I think the customers and my staff as well, everybody's sort of looking forward to the next step, right? It's just we can see the finish line, hopefully. Um, I would say within the last couple of months, I have started seeing some faces that I didn't see all year. I mean, I for one reason or another, whether they were an at-risk community or whatever, there were plenty of folks that I just didn't see, that I used to see once or twice or three times a week, and I'm starting to see some of those faces again. And the conversation has very much become one about when will events start happening again. Um, I mean, my bottom line has been fine, better than fine, frankly, for the last 6 months. But now we're at the point where we're starting to have the conversation about when does my event space open back up? What does that look like? And that's a whole nother set of challenges. But they're ones they're ones that are much preferable to the alternative. So
All right. And then how about you, Tim? You were nodding there. What's the vibe like for your store?
Oh, it's fantastic. Everything Paul says is absolutely true. It's just really feels like a true spring. How the flowers bloom and all that kind of stuff. And like he said, yeah, I'm getting faces in. I haven't seen in over a year, and it's nice seeing people again. And I've gotten more groups, and I've sort of pivoted also because unlike Paul and Donna, retail is like my third SKU behind my admissions, memberships, and food and beverage. So I rely on people. People is, to have is my number one SKU. And so it's really good to see people back. And I've gotten things like I've got a bridge group in there, a pinochle group, a euchre group, backgammon group. So I've got the sort of non-gamer groups, but they're still playing games, but not, the board games we talk about. So I've got a whole different demographic in my store. And it's really nice because it just brings a whole new vibe to the place as well.
I didn't know people played euchre outside of Michigan. I thought it was a
I know.
Michigan thing.
Yes. And 90% of the people here playing are from Michigan too.
Oh, okay. And then how about you, Donna? What's the vibe like for you around now?
Everyone has been very cautious here. I am in the media capital of the world, which means that there are people who come into my store every day who are famous on something and I just don't recognize them. But so that creates a very conscientious atmosphere, right? Because a lot of the city's revenue will shut down. The state's revenue will shut down if we have a plague go through those people, right? The entertainment industry. So everyone has had, except for my landlord, an abundance of caution. And so to add to that, yes, there is a lot of excitement for the idea of coming back to a store. We are being really quite cautious ourselves. We could open our gameplay space right now with limited capacity, but we are choosing to wait until the June 15th when everything but the mask mandate comes down for us here. And I want to make sure everyone has a chance to get vaccinated rather than divide our customers between the vaccinated and the not, as far as being able to come in and play. So hopeful and excited, but also there are people I haven't seen this whole time because they are being very careful, and it's good to see those faces again.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you brought up, Donna, because all of us live in different states and we all have different guidelines, right, that the governors are dictating or whatever. And so I'm just like you, but in a different sense. I mean, I'm extremely cautious. I've got my vaccine, all my staff did, heavily masking and all that kind of stuff. However, our guidelines are a little bit more lenient here. They have been in Nevada. So even though I'm really on the side of caution and all that kind of stuff, I'm just very simply following the guidelines that are being set forth by our state.
yeah, in Maryland, I could legally open my game room right now, but I'm choosing not to. I'm waiting to see how the next few months go.
Okay, all of your sound like you're taking extra precautions. So I'm curious, what if, because it's early, right? We haven't given the vaccines a whole lot of time. We know they should be working, but what happens if a new wave or a new strain comes through and things worsen again? How do you think you're better prepared, or are you better prepared, or will this be a complete doom and gloom if things get worse again in the country? Donna?
Because we did go ahead and put everything online, we are better prepared to deal with it than we were at the very beginning. So can we weather it again? I don't know. We're very fortunate that we have customers who have very intentionally come in and said, I am coming to you. I will not go to Amazon. I know that small businesses need us at this time. So special order it, do what you have to, but I would like this. And I'm grateful for that loyalty and that attitude that people are pushing around. Small businesses matter. But if it got worse, I can't say. I think we would be okay, but it would mean having to put some staff back. Yeah, I don't want to think about it. I know I have to, but I'm scared. I'm scared if that happens for my own health as well. I have atypical cystic fibrosis, and so anything dealing with respiratory is certainly hospitalization immediately for me.
That's scary. Paul, you said e-commerce has been a big thing for you. So if things got worse again, do you think that's enough that will help your business survive?
It's hard to say. I mean, we were pleasantly surprised when e-commerce really started taking off, that we found a lot of ex-customers that have relocated to other parts of the country were buying from us again. We have a lot of, we're near a lot of military bases. We're sort of in between Baltimore and DC. So there's a lot of transient federal employees, and they end up all over the place. And we've discovered that a lot of those folks are buying from us, even though they weren't in the area anymore. That being said, most of my business still happens through the front door. Um, the curious challenge we find ourselves in now is a little counterintuitive. And I was having this conversation with a couple other retailers last week, is that for many of us, our event space, we found a new way to monetize our event space, and it became new storage space, or that's where we handle all our e-commerce. So now, confronted with the idea of reopening that, it's an entirely different equation as to what the business's profitability looks like. And there's a certain matter of, well, how much of our business that's happening now is the goodwill of our customer base because they feel like they're part of the community that was built in that event room.
Mhm.
And what happens if that event room continues to be inaccessible for another 6 or 9 or 12 months, or things get really bad and we got to close the front door and it's just e-commerce? There's a lot of variables. I think it would be okay, but we would definitely have to downsize. It's hard to say.
Right. How about you, Tim? How do you see things if things get worse again with the virus?
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, it wouldn't be good because again, my whole business is people focused, is getting people together. One of our most popular nights was our meetup night because I'm sure it might even probably be more severe than Paul, because Paul said he's got very transient, but Las Vegas is extremely transient. We get people moving and coming in all the time. So it was really great for just singles to come in, to meet people. I would have, games set up, and, somebody come in, oh, hi, you first time here in Vegas? Great. Oh, Grant, we got Susie here, first time here. She's looking for a game. He's like, okay, come over here. We're looking for another one here. We'd have games set up. We'd have big werewolf games, 2 rooms and a boom, whatever. But it was really popular. And that's one of the things that's we're not able to do. I haven't really promoted the meetup nights yet. I haven't even started that yet because I don't want a bunch of random people coming in. But yeah, it would be devastating if this ever picked up or kicked off again. And I sure hope it doesn't.
Right. Okay. Well, I wonder, so we've seen a lot of people in lockdown. A lot of people may or may not have social bubbles, but a lot of people, their gaming habits have changed due to lockdown and quarantine. So I'm curious, from your perspective, selling games and really being in touch with the community, what trends have you noticed over the last year and a half in terms of what people are playing during quarantine? Paul?
Uh, well, the first one right out the gate when things shut down, I think anybody that sold jigsaw puzzles saw that skyrocket. We're still dealing with stock issues from some of the major suppliers. Jigsaw puzzles just exploded. I also started seeing a lot more interest in 2-player games and solo games. I think the interest in solo games has dipped off a bit. Jigsaw puzzles a little bit, but 2-player games are still more popular than ever, I would think. People have their bubbles, and even though they're getting bigger, folks are still playing with their spouses or the one person, their roommate or what have you. So that was sort of the big things. Then of course there's the Pokemon issue. I don't know how who else carries Pokemon, but Pokemon you can't keep in stock at any price right now. That's a whole panel in and of itself. What's going on over there with certain elements of the collectibles
Are you
business.
talking about the trading card game specifically?
Yeah, the trading card game specifically. The short version is I think people couldn't play Pokemon because events all shut down, but part of that engaging with that brand is collecting them all, and it's a brand that's 25 years old now. So we have fully grown adults who grew up with that, who now have disposable income and want that Charizard that they could never get. So the secondary market for Pokemon has gone crazy. Walmart stopped people from. I think Walmart stopped trading card sales entirely. Whereas Target only sells on certain days when the customer service desk. It's nuts. So yeah, and I mean it's not just Pokemon. Pokemon's the best known example, but there's other trading card games that are kind of getting crazy too.
Interesting. Okay. And then Donna, what do you see happening now? Like as we're sort of transitioning, we're at a transition period. Do you see those trends changing from what Paul just described, or do you kind of see those staying the same for a little while?
I do see people now coming in for party games. So the 5 to 8 range usually. And part of that is because Los Angeles is so expensive. Most roommate situations are 3 people and up in a household of singles. And so everyone's kind of trying not to murder each other and their roommates and get too frustrated. So they're coming in and buying more board games that they can engage those people in as well. And some outdoor socialization. Codenames XL has been a very good example. People are asking for games that you can see from a little further from the table so that you can have a little more space between you. And so that's been interesting.
How about you, Tim? Are you noticing any new trends or old trends coming back now that we're at this phase of the pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the big things I've noticed is, we don't do CCGs like Paul does. We're 95% board games and 5% D&D, and that D&D is 5th edition, pretty much exclusively. But before, when people would like sort of get into board games, they would come in and they'd be like, like sort of like the standards, right? If they were new into the board gaming world, it'd be like Catan, Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, Pandemic, things like that. But now I have people come in and they'll be like, oh yeah, I really got into board games. A friend of mine taught me. I've got Catan and Terraforming Mars. It's like their range, because they, their friends group, they got stuck in the pandemic and maybe their friend only had a certain level. So like the range is all over the place, instead of like, oh, I just play party games or just play the light games. They'll have like I said, Codenames and Terraforming Mars on the shelf. And it's just wider. So it's really nice to see.
Oh, that's really fascinating. So do you think with some groups maybe that had access to maybe more core gamers in their bubbles, do you think it's converting them and it's turning them into hobbyist gamers?
Not only converting them, I really think that it's sort of, I don't know what Paul and Donna would think, but I don't know if there's still that stigma a little bit that, gaming's for like dorks or not cool or whatever. I mean, I don't know, but it just seems like more people, I don't know if converted them, but actually just turned on to the idea or became open to the idea of exploring games. And all of a sudden they found how fascinating they are, besides, the ones we played like Sorry and Monopoly and stuff like that, what is out there. And I just think that people just never knew that whole entire world existed. So I think we have a lot of people who discovered outside of just the standard games you might find in like, Toys R Us or something like that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Paul? Like, are you seeing the sort of same trends with at this transition phase of the pandemic?
Well, so I think that in a lot of ways that's been kind of an ongoing trend for many years at this point. Even probably about a year or so before the pandemic, I really started noticing my demographics on Saturday afternoon were changing, in that more and more of my sales on Saturdays were becoming board games, and they were from people that would never use the word gamer to describe themselves.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was enough of sort of a seed of those kinds of folks that were kind of exploring our style of board games prior to the pandemic, that those folks just got more invested, and now perhaps some of those friends are more invested. It's something that's I think has kind of been growing for a while, and the pandemic just exacerbated it.
All right. So some of the other things we heard about during the pandemic, like issues that have popped up that would impact retail, things like rising paper costs out of production and shipping issues, all over the world. So have you seen, can you talk about some of the issues that have come up? Are you seeing prices go up, and do you think they'll continue to go up? If so, do you think, or do you see other problems coming down the line for the retail business? Or is this really not an issue and you think it's kind of behind us? Donna?
I think ours is really just being able to restock certain titles that have been out for a while. Everdell, Wingspan, we went pretty deep before Christmas, so we've been okay, but that is not the story around the US typically. Root, and I don't know how many people would give up their roommates or children for Shining Fate right now. Like Paul said, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I think it's really just about availability. Our shipping costs have not changed much. There were periods where our UPS guy, Manny, looked bedraggled, like we were giving him sodas every day. Like, keep it going, man, I'm sorry. But yeah, that's it. I think we've just had supply issues and not really much else as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. How about you, Tim? Do you see any of these problems kind of trickling down to the retail side, prices and rising costs or anything like that?
I don't really know, again, because, even though I do pretty well in games, again, it's my third sort of revenue source. And I know Asmodee's sort of had a kind of, $3, $4, $5 price increase on a lot of their line recently. But it's weird because, again, unlike Paul and Donna, I don't know the exact numbers, but I don't, out of the people who buy board games, I don't get a whole lot of just like people just to come buy games. They're either, they either play there and buy a game on their way out. They're, tourists, maybe come to check out the place, stay, play games, buy games on their way out. So I don't probably spend as much time with analysis and stuff as Paul and Donna do on retail. So I don't know. Sorry, I don't have a good answer for you.
No worries. Paul, so I'm curious, you're getting into e-commerce and stuff. How do you compete with some of the sites, the heavily discounted sites, like a Cool Stuff Inc. or Miniature Market or Amazon, right? A lot of people order their games through Amazon. How do you stay relevant, either as an independent e-commerce store or as a physical brick and mortar store?
So there's kind of two answers to the question. One I think is that my local community is gonna support me, and folks that are feel an emotional connection to the store because of the community or because of the friendships that they made there, even though they might be further afield now, are going to buy from us because they want to support us. But then there's the people that have never set foot in my store that are now buying from me. And to sort of dovetail into your previous question about rising costs and the shipping infrastructure that's kind of crazy. One thing I neglected to mention earlier about the trends that happened is we do a lot of business in miniatures and miniature painting, and of course painting is a very solitary activity. So especially at the beginning of the pandemic, paints and paint supplies sort of blew up, and Games Workshop in particular is having some serious supply issues right now with new releases. I mean, I'm the kind of store that gets 10, 12, 15, 20 of a new release on any given week, and we're lately been getting 2. And to touch on Donna's previous point about about certain hot games, my little birds that are friends in publishing have suggested that a lot of these titles we're going to see the next reprint. And then given the way that shipping is, we're not likely to see another reprint before holiday. So thankfully I've got the cash flow at my store to, I mean, I'm stocking for fourth quarter now, on particularly on those titles like Everdell and Wingspan and things like that. So to circle back to the immediate question at hand, which is how do I compete, is depth really at this point. The number of successes that I've had over the last 3 months where product X had dried up from the stream, but I'm still sitting on cases of it. And then all it takes is one little mention in the correct games, Reddit thread or forum, and suddenly my sales go through the roof, because I've stocked deeply. Now, normally that stocks, I'm sort of seeding my supply to last through the famine until the next print run. But at this point, like, I'll take the sales wherever I can get it, and sometimes that means I blow through it online to folks that can't get it other places. And then there's this weird balancing act you have to do where you want to support your local community with a product that sells at $20, that's the MSRP, but the secondary market, it's selling for 60. So at some point, I might even raise the price online and it's cheaper in store because I want to make sure that my locals get it and I'm not getting people that are just buying from me to resell it on eBay or whatever.
Mhm.
So there's this weird sort of dance that has to occur now. It's a weird world. I think Q4 is gonna get real hairy.
Wow, that's really interesting. So has it ever occurred to you, like, would you want to sell, in that example you just gave, a game at $60 that should almost MSRP at 20?
In store, rarely. Online, happily.
Okay. And then how about you, Donna? You mentioned you also have the loyal customers who are there to support you no matter what. And what other ways do you think you could compete with some of the online places like Amazon?
We don't. We do MSRP no matter what. Like Paul was saying, if something goes up to 60 that's normally 20, we're selling for 20. If some person on Amazon is selling potentially counterfeit copies for 5, we're still selling at 20. And I feel like that has given us a lot of respect amongst the community, especially when it came to certain Magic releases and Warhammer.
Mhm.
But so yeah, we're not even trying. We're just sticking to our guns and doing what we feel is the right decision. But it's obviously not right for all.
It's true.
Most of mine is local, and I have relationships with those customers. I very rarely get online orders that aren't people that we know.
I'd love to just put a fine point on Donna's very, very quick response, a succinct answer as to how how do you compete with online. Her answer was, we don't. I think that's a really important thing that most retailers should take to heart, because most of those customers that are shopping for price, they're not really your customers anyway. Like, we're building communities, right? We're building communities, and sometimes that means people that want to play in your game room 2 or 3 times a week, and sometimes communities don't it doesn't even necessarily mean somebody's in my game room. It could just be the person that likes to shop locally and knows the staff and trusts their opinion on things. And at some point, if you're chasing after the customer who's motivated by price, it's a losing proposition. So 99 times out of 100, I'm not concerned with price.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% too, Paul, because, like I tell people, I tell my staff, whatever, like, you can buy a product cheaper on Amazon. You can get better food literally across the parking lot. We've got, restaurants and pizza parlors and whatever right in my own shopping center. What I'm selling is an experience. You know what I mean? When people come in, I want them to, whether they just come in for a tour around the store, to buy a game or whatever, they're in there for 2 minutes or they're in there for 6 hours, that they're going to leave and their day has been better. Because they're in there and I'm selling an experience. That's my number one product. And I tell people that all the time. So yeah, it shouldn't matter like what prices are. However, the problem, kind of to stay on this topic, is like what CMON does now with their Kickstarters and they don't give an SRP. And that causes a whole new dynamic, because what do you determine is a fair price? And then each store is going to have to come up with their own price for that situation, like they did with the latest Zombicide second edition. I called CMON directly. I've got a contact there, and it's like, what, you just have to make your own decision what your price is going to be. Because online that set was going for like $350, and I wasn't going to go anywhere near that. So what price do you set?
Yeah,
So how do you,
I mean, Kickstarter stuff is a whole different equation.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
so how do you make those pricing decisions in those situations?
Well, I was honest, because, for example, the Zombicide, the add-ons, like it was the Zombicide base, and you got the I don't know, whatever, some box with the base, then you got the expansion, you got something else with that. So there were 4 total, but the 2 extra were Kickstarter only. So the SRP, according to, like, I looked at like Cool Stuff or Game Nerds, whatever, was like 109 for like the base and 49 for the second box, whatever it was. That was like $160. So I just ended up selling them for 200, and they would get all 4. And I just told people, I said, yeah, there's the SRP, $160. I'm just going to make, 25%. So $200 for all 4 games. And that was like still, 75 per, not, or a little, almost half of what was going for online.
I approach Kickstarters very differently. I tend to price up a little bit from that, because we typically get less margin on Kickstarter stuff. It's usually more of a workload. That being said, I find out what current market is and try to sneak in right under it.
Interesting. Okay, well, we're almost out of time. I just want to end with one more thing, and kind of following up with something you just said, Tim. So I'll have you go first. So we talked about, it's hard to just be a pure retail business, perhaps, right? And you're not necessarily chasing after customers with the best price only. So a lot of your stores that you all mentioned, you do other things besides just a strict retail outlet. So let's talk about that a little bit. And like starting with Tim, like what is the one thing your business could not do without? What's the one thing that makes your business different, that makes it stand out? And what is that experience that someone walks away with and makes them a loyal customer to your store?
Oh, well, the thing I really enjoy is because we have a huge library, and when people come in and they say, hey, I'm looking for a game, I get people all the time, hey, I'm going camping, we want something, that I can bring in a backpack, or I got, my friends and family coming over. I'm like, well, great, come in here. And I pull a game off the shelf and I'll sit with them for 20 minutes and I'll demo, stuff like that, because, I want to really give them an experience to, feel and taste the game and, what it's going to be like. So, not having that, I personally just don't want to be a store, like just to sell games. That's not what I got into this for. It was for the community, playing games, teaching games, getting people together, werewolf, doing all that kind of stuff, whatever. So I just like the aspect that I'm able to offer that to people when they come in, that I can really give them sort of an informed decision instead of just looking at a box. I'll sit down with them and play it and demo, let them open it up, touch pieces. Even if I don't have time, I just say, hey, listen, I'll look in the catalog. Oh, it's over here at, B12. I'll go grab it for them here. Go ahead, open it up, look at it, check out the components, see what you think before you buy it. So I just like being able to do that extra step because of the way my store is set up.
How do you keep track of all the rules in your head? If you're like, I could recommend all these different games to different customers that come in, how do you keep track? How do you know to demo these games? Like I have to reread rules all the time, even for games I know very well, because I just have too many in my head at a time. But how do you keep track of all these rules?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, even though I've got 2,600 games in a library, I mean, there's probably, 1,000 of them that's never even been taken off the shelf. So it's not like people play all of them. And then the ones I want to sell, the ones that are good, are going to be the same 20 or 30 games anyway. You know what I mean? So you got a very select group to pick from. So it's pretty much those same games that I'm just recommending all the time.
Makes sense. And then Paul, same question to you. What is the experience that you want people to have when they visit your store?
I think it's a twofold. It's curated stock and specialists on staff. So by curated stock, I mean I bring in stuff that's not available through most easily accessible channels. I import stuff from Europe. I bring in stuff from tiny little publishers that have 2 titles. I do a lot of that, especially on the miniature side of things, because we we're 10 minutes away from where the Games Workshop US headquarters was for decades. So we've sort of got miniatures gamers in the bedrock. So we have weird third-party accessories from all over the world that we bring in. And then combine that with a large enough staff so that I've got an expert in every part of the store. I've got generalists too, but if you really want to learn like an advanced paint technique, I've got 2 people on staff that could talk to you about that. If you really want to, talk to a guy that's played every roll and write game known to man, I've got one of those too. And then, the curated stock also, points to Tim's point about the 20 or 30 games that you're going to sell over and over again. Those are the games that I'm going to stop very deeply. Or sometimes, it's a new game that won't get the love unless it's out of the box, right? Like a couple years ago, it was Planet from Blue Orange Games, right? You might not take a look at it in the box, but out of the box, it has these giant 3D pieces that you're putting together, and simply putting that on the table where people could see it, they might not be exposed to it otherwise. I'm going to make a hit out of that over the course of a holiday season or what have you. So curated stock and specialists on staff that can talk your ear off about minutia.
It's interesting. It's almost like you're a little piece of a convention, because there's those things that stop traffic and people need to take a look to see what that is. So, interesting tactic. How about you, Donna? And like, what's the experience that makes your store stand out, and what's special and makes people want to come in?
I think that we are just friendly. I know that seems strange, but I myself am a filthy casual, and I admit it. Splendor is one of my favorite games. Sorry. So I'm not the one who's teaching terraforming Mars. Yeah, but my business partner is. He is more of a Euro gamer. So between the two of us, we kind of get everybody, and I'm the RPG nerd as well. That poor Eric, he just doesn't understand why we like it. Again, he's got the Euro games, and he's gonna, play diplomacy all day with people. So yes, that curated experience that Tim talked about, you can't put a price on that. I absolutely will walk around with people, and if there's a game I don't know, I'm like, hold on, I got, boardgamegeek.com right here. Let's look at that with a grain of salt and see what, those ratings look like. And here's a synopsis, this is a worker placement deck builder. Great. Do you like that? What have you played like that? Just, tell me the last thing that hit the table that you enjoy. And so that's what I'm going to try to steer them towards, is getting to know them and how many people are expecting to play. And then, like Paul had said, we had turned our gameplay area during the holidays into a bit of a showroom. So we actually had those board games open, and you could see the pieces and kind of, pick up that rule book and decide, how's the production quality on this item? Photosynthesis from Blue Orange Games, again, is one of those that nobody would have picked up from the box. Yep. Maybe. I mean, it's still pretty, but huge effing trees, brutal game for such a pretty one. And you just can't tell that from the box.
Yep. And I think Paul brings up a great point, like he said. And again, what Donna said about being friendly, but Paul said about being experts. And that's one of the things I decided early on about my store. I don't do CCGs. I don't do miniatures. I do, like I said, board games and 5% RPG, and the miniatures I have are the whiz kids for the D&D figures. But so we can sort of be experts per se on one thing. People come in and say, oh, do you sell Pokemon? Nope. There's a store right up the street. I give them directions. You can go over there. There's do you have, this war game? Nope. There's a store right over there. We do board games. So we can really give those customers a knowledgeable, true experience, because that's all we do. So you need to have, I agree with what Paul said, if you have to have staff that really knows what your product is and have passion about it, because that's only going to turn over to the customer, right? They're going to feel that if people know what they're talking about.
Yep, I absolutely agree. When I first got into the hobby, I attribute a lot of it to a staff at a game store in Berkeley, just asking the people like, hey, I like this, what would you recommend? And they really were knowledgeable and really caused some of this problem back here for me. So But that's all the time we have for today. So I want to thank you three very much for your time for the D4 panel today. And, hopefully the things will continue on the upswing and the country becomes much safer. More people be coming into the stores and supporting everyone, and we'll get back to a normal gaming life soon. So thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone for watching this panel, and we'll see you all later.
Thanks.
Bye.